Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm pretty welcome to my podcast. In this episode, let's dive into why democracy without economic freedom is not democracy at all. It's just an illusion of political freedom. We are told that democracy is about free elections, political rights, and the ability to express dissent. Governments boast about the democratic values, pointing to the ballot boxes, constitutions, and parliaments as proof of people's rule. But political freedom without economic freedom is an illusion. A country cannot be called democratic simply because it holds elections. It must ensure that people have real control over their lives, their labor, and their future as well. What does voting mean when economy is controlled by a handful of billionaires? What does free speech mean when the price of dissent is starvation, job loss, or jail? What does democracy mean when thousands are political prisoners locked up for resisting oppression? A society where corporations hoard wealth, workers struggle to survive, and political dissent is criminalized is not a democracy. It is a control system that maintains power for the few while giving the illusion of choice to the many. Let's break down how economic and political freedom must go hand in hand. Why political prisoners are the greatest proof that democracy is a lie, and what real democracy should look like. Political freedom without economic freedom is just meaningless. Governments love to talk about the rights and freedoms, but they never talk about economic control. That's because real democracy would require economic justice, and that is something the ruling class will never allow. Voting does not equal power. People are told that choosing a leader every 5 years is a definition of democracy, but what happens in between? The rich control the economy, influence policies, and manipulate elections through money and media. No matter who wins, the same corporations and political elites remain in control. Workers have no say over their own workplaces, communities, or industries. They simply follow orders from those who hold power. If people have no control over the economy, land, and resources, how can they be called free? Freedom of speech does not pay the bills. A poor worker is free to criticize the government, but if they lose their job for it, can they really afford that freedom? Farmers are free to demand their fair wages, but if they are crushed under debt, how much does their voice matter? Students are free to protest, but if they are arrested, expelled, and branded criminals, what use is that freedom? Freedom without the economic means to exercise it is a hollow promise. Poverty is a prison without walls. If people cannot afford healthcare, education, housing, and food, their choices in life are already made for them. They are forced to work in low paying jobs, accept exploitation, and obey the system just to survive. Economic dependence means that people are never truly free to challenge injustice. A democracy where the wealthy live in luxury and the poor fight for survival is not democracy, it is feudalism with elections. And political prisoners are the proof that democracy is a lie. A country that calls itself democratic but jails those who resist oppression is not a democracy, it is an authoritarian state with a good PR. Who are the actual who are the political prisoners in India? They are mostly Dalit activists who fight against caste violence, Muslim youth falsely accused under anti-terror laws, Adivasi leaders who resist land grabs by corporations, students, student leaders, journalists, and human rights defenders who expose government corruptions are these are the ones who are political prisoners. These people are not in prison because they committed crimes. They are in prison because they dare to challenge power. The criminalization of dissent. When workers protest, they are called anti national. When students demand justice, they are labeled terrorists. When journalists report the truth, they are arrested for sedition. Democracy means the right to challenge the system without fear. If people are being jailed, harassed, and silenced for speaking up, then democracy does not exist. The legal system is a tool of control. Billionaires evade taxes, steal land, and loot public resources, but they never go to jail. A poor farmer, unable to pay back a small loan, is driven to suicide or arrested for debt. Adivasis, Dalits, and Muslims face arbitrary arrests and police brutality every day. The legal system does not protect the weak, it protects those in power. If the law is used to crush resistance, then democracy is a lie. The hypocrisy of the global order. The Indian government calls itself democratic while criminalizing protests and free speech. The world praises India's democracy while ignoring the thousands jailed under UAPA and sedition laws. The media promotes freedom while ignoring the fact that activists, students, and marginalized communities are being locked up for demanding justice. A democracy that jails its critics is not a democracy, it's a dictatorship hiding behind elections. Now, what would real democracy look like? Truly democratic society would not just guarantee voting rights, it would ensure that people have control over their economy, land, labor, and resources. Economic freedom is a right to control one's own life, public ownership of resources instead of corporate monopolies, worker led industries instead of billionaire controlled corporations, guaranteed housing, healthcare, and education instead of forcing people into debt and dependence. People should not have to beg for survival. They should have guaranteed rights to a decent life. Political freedom is the right to resist without persecution. No political prisoners. The right to protest without state violence. Laws that punish corporate and government crimes, not activism and dissent. A real democracy would not just allow criticism, it would ensure that no government or corporation has enough power to silence its critics in the first place. Community led governance is real decision making power. People's councils at local and national levels to decide economic policies instead of leaving decisions to corporations and elites. Democratic land reforms that return stolen land to Dalits, Adivasis, and farmers, a justice system led by people, not politicians and their police forces. Until economic and political systems are controlled by people themselves, democracy is just a performance. Democracy means more than just elections. If people do not have economic independence, they're not free. If people do not have the right to dissent, they're not free. If people do not have the power to control their own future, they're not free at all. A system that guarantees only voting but not real power is not a democracy. It is a managed system of control. I'm saying it again. Until the wealth, land, and economy are in the hands of the people, until political prisoners are freed, until protest is not met with violence, there will be no real democracy. The question is not who gets elected, but who actually holds power in society. Because real democracy is not just choosing leaders, it's about dismantling the structures that keep people powerless in the first place. And the moment people stop believing in this fake democracy, the fight for a real one begins. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to support me and comment on what I said, please feel free to do so. Thank you. Have a good day, or evening, or night. Bye.